You're listening to a Sister Stargazers special edition. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sister Stargazers. You can email us at connect@sisterstargazers.com. Send us an email. Let us know any questions you have, because today we are going to do a deep dive conversation around the 4th of July, the birth of the United States, and its chart. So I'm going to hand this over to Jude, because apparently even countries have a birth chart. So Jude, where should we start with this?
Yeah, it might come as a surprise to some folks that a country can have a birth chart. So it's a time and a place and a date. It's the same information you would gather for a person if you were doing a natal, which is a birth chart for a person, a natal chart.
Okay.
So you can also check your town to see if your town has a birth time.
Wow.
Usually they record the date, like this town was, incorporated is usually the word.
Right.
I've seen it on signs, and sometimes they have an actual, if you go back into the records, there's an actual time that the town was ratified in whatever, a group meeting or some kind of declaration or something.
Board of directors or city council or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we have a birth date and a time for the United States.
That's awesome.
Which is, it's one of the many charts. There are several charts that are out there, but there's one called the Sibley Chart that was the recorded date. And then this is also somewhat up for grabs, but there's been a number of verifications, right? Even Jefferson in his writings put the date, and then there was a little bit of a kind of a, it might be not considered a total truth on the time, because what Jefferson and Franklin and one other person, I think it might have been Hamilton, wanted to do was to kind of put it out there as a statement that all of the signers of the Declaration of Independence signed it on this day. But when you dig a little deeper and you look at some of the other records, that's debatable whether everybody signed off on it on that date of July 4th, 1776 at 5:10 local mean time, or if it was then sent to the printer, that original document that Jefferson and Franklin signed, and then was distributed to the folks.
Oh, interesting.
So there's some questioning around that, and I'm just putting that out there. I'm not a United States.
We're not historians,
but so I'm just saying that the Sibley chart was a time, place, date that was developed or given to us by Ebenezer Sibley.
Ooh, that's a cool name.
Yes, Ebenezer Sibley was a contemporary. He was born in 1751 and he died in around 1799. So He was around 25 when the Declaration of Independence was signed in Philadelphia in 1776. He's celebrated for casting this natal horoscope, which he published in 1787.
But not in America. Was he living in America?
I don't believe he was. He was in London.
Okay, so he's British.
Yeah, he's British.
Okay,
he was a British physician, astrologer, and writer on the occult.
Wow.
This particular date and time was cited in the printing of the Declaration of Independence that went out. So I think that's where it came from.
Yeah.
And then Sibley cast a chart for it and published it in 1787.
Okay, 10-ish years later. Interesting. Okay, and this chart is what you're using today.
Yeah, a lot of people are using it. And, you have to think about the time that this speaks to. Like, there was only letter writing.
Right.
And there was only the printing press, which was hand cranked.
Right.
And things were put in the printing press. The lettering that was printed had to be set.
Hand set,
Hand set. So every letter had to be put into a frame and printed. So all of this took time. So 10 years isn't really, like, in that period of time, would be considered quick because things just took so much longer.
I imagine he had to also research where the planets are. It's not like now when you can plug stuff into a computer program and boom, you have a chart in like 5 minutes. But ding, chart ready. Like
exactly. He had to calculate.
He had to calculate everything. Yeah. Awesome.
It was all done by hand. There must have been his consultations with ephemerae. And you have to kind of put this into the context of the time.
Awesome.
This particular chart is really an interesting take on the country because it has the rising sign is Sagittarius and the sun is in the 7th house.
Okay.
The other thing that's really interesting about this is that the 4th house, the bottom of the chart, the foundation of the chart is at 1 degree Aries, which is basically 0 degrees. Aries is the Aries point. Okay. It's a cardinal point. It's a sign of initiation. It's the first day of spring in the calendar of the Western world. It's the first day of fall in the Southern hemisphere. It's this starting point. It's this plunge into something new. Yeah. So to have that 1 degree Aries at the bottom, at the foundational point of the chart. And the other interesting thing about this chart is that when you look at the 4th house, which is that bottom section of the 12 sections of the zodiac, the 4th house, Aries goes from 1 degree where it starts to 29 degrees where it ends, the 4th house. Right. So the entire Aries slice of the zodiac is in the 4th house of this particular Sibley chart, which is giving a tremendous power to initiate.
Wow.
We were talking backstage a little bit about, is there anything in this chart that, has this pioneer aspect to it? And
rugged individualism.
And this is it.
Wow.
Yeah. And now that puts 1 degree Libra at the top of the chart, which is all about being diplomatic and ruling planet of Venus, right? Venus ruling Libra, being diplomatic, being a balancing factor.
I was going to say, does it have anything to do with equality?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And, what is yours and what is mine and sharing. So that's at the top of the chart. Wow. At the very top of the chart. So that's another cardinal placement. So the foundation of the country being all about being an individual and the individual rights. And then the top of the chart, the midheaven, being all about the sharing of responsibilities, the sharing of those rights, the equality, the being diplomatic, compromising, coming together around, diverse issues and compromising. That's the other thing about that 10th house, which is across from the 4th house, is that it starts with 1 degree Libra and it ends with 29 degrees Libra. Wow. So the entire scope of Libra sensibility is in the 10th house. So kind of like the career of the country is to demonstrate, is to show, is to model, is to be professional in resolving issues and coming together and working together and harmonizing and compromising and working on issues of equality and what is fair and what is just and what is right.
Well, that's fascinating.
So that was very interesting to me when I saw that, because I haven't really used this chart before.
Well, and the reason we wanted to kind of look at this particular USA chart, not only because our show happened to fall on the 4th of July and this seemed appropriate, but this year in particular has a really significant aspect to what is called a Pluto return. So maybe can you tell us what that is all about and describe why it's so significant right now?
Well, many people may have experienced, most everyone who's at least 30 years old, have experienced a Saturn return. Okay. And everyone who has a birthday experiences a solar return. And that's the time, your birthday, when the sun comes around to where it was when you were born.
And that takes a year. So August to August, my birthday, that's a solar return.
Right.
And Saturn takes then 30-ish?
29, 30-ish years.
Okay.
And each of these has a particular signature, each of these types of returns. So
Okay.
Saturn return deals with issues of responsibility, everything that's about Saturn. So responsibility,
Sure, yeah.
discipline, honing in, focusing, concentrating, using your time wisely, growing up, in other words, it's a time to leave childish ways behind and move into your career, a family, duties.
Well, when you think about when turning 30, like people are expected to have their stuff together and know what they're doing. And
It's exactly. I mean, a lot of folks start their families around that time, between 28 and 34, somewhere in there. They're starting to focus in on, a long-term or somewhat of a focus,
structured, consistency.
So that's involved with Saturn returns.
Okay.
Now, Pluto returns take around 250 years.
Wow, because he's so far out. Pluto is such a far out planet. It takes so long.
It takes 250 years for Pluto to get back to where it was at the time that a chart was cast.
Okay.
So for this US Sibley chart, which was cast at 5:10 p.m. local mean time in Philadelphia on July 4th, 1776, there's a 250 years from July 4th, 1776 is this year, or
246 specifically. Yeah,
yes,
we're just rounding up for simplicity. 246 years it takes Pluto. So I, as an individual, will never see a Pluto return unless I live to be about 300.
Exactly.
So that Pluto then really affects things like countries, towns, cities, states. What is the significance or structure of a Pluto return?
Well, Pluto has everything to do with understanding our deeper motives. And Pluto has a very kind of shady, it gets a lot of bad rap, It does, because Pluto is the lord of the underworld, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And Pluto is about all things scorpionic. By scorpionic, I mean that deal with those dark parts of our soul, our consciousness, the 7 deadly sins, the things that we don't like to, admit to ourselves.
That's the sign of Scorpio when you say Scorpio. So Scorpio rules Pluto, Pluto rules Scorpio.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, got it.
So Pluto is about those things that are kind of unseen, kind of stuffed under the rug, kind of unspoken. The good side of Pluto is that it asks us to look at all of that.
Yeah.
Whenever you're experiencing a Pluto aspect, and you can experience one in your lifetime, it's not so much that you would have a Pluto return.
Yeah.
But you could have, for example, Pluto could be moving into any position to either make a conjunction, a trine, an opposition, or any aspect at all to one of your natal planets.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So Pluto is the great transformer.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Because that sounds like there's possibility. Because where there's transformation, there's so it isn't just doom and gloom. There's a sense of possibility. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it can be, if you want to look at an analogy or a metaphor, you can think about the compost pile. Kind of a smelly, awful, decaying place, right? Right?
Well, yeah. If you don't compost right, don't put meat in your compost.
Right. But okay, so what does compost consist of? But all those things that are like the skins of stuff, the scraps, all the stuff that you can't eat, you put it into the compost pile.
Yeah.
And what happens in the process? So Pluto is about process as well. What happens in the process of the breakdown is the regeneration of a component that adds value to the soil.
Yeah.
Right? If we're talking about compost.
Yes.
We can also look at this as a metaphor for the cycle of an insect, for example, a butterfly.
Okay. Yes.
So a butterfly starts out as larvae, right? Kind of ugly, little
maggot,
kind of gross.
Yeah. Or a worm.
Okay, so this is just our cultural bias, right? Okay, how does it become a butterfly? Okay, which came first?
It's a caterpillar. Okay. It goes into the caterpillar.
Yeah, so the eggs are laid, right? It becomes a caterpillar. Yeah. It eats through whatever synergetic plant is associated with it. It makes a cocoon out of itself.
Yeah.
So here's the Pluto part.
Okay.
It makes a cocoon out of itself, outside of itself. So it's inside the cocoon.
Yes. Yes.
Inside the cocoon, it
Yes.
begins to liquefy.
Yeah. Break down.
Right. And then
Yeah.
what emerges on the other side is this incredible butterfly. Once it breaks through, once it goes through that process
of transformation.
Yeah.
Metamorphosis.
Yes, that's another word for Pluto.
Let me just interject here that you're listening to Sister Stargazers, and we're talking about the USA, the chart of the United States of America, the birth chart, and specifically this year, the Pluto return. Okay, then let's keep going. So we've got this year a Pluto return, transformation, metamorphosis. Where do we go with that?
We can look at the position of Pluto in the natal chart of the country.
Yeah, where does it sit and what aspects it?
So in this particular chart, Pluto is located in the second house.
Okay.
And the second house is all about what the self, or in this case, the country, has to work with materially.
Okay.
And because the second house is Capricorn in this particular chart, we're looking at the earth, the land, the soil, the minerals.
Okay. Our resources.
And then,
okay.
We can also look at, because it's the country, we can look at the stock exchange.
Okay.
Commodities,
okay.
Which are really the base commodities are like livestock
yes.
and corn
grain.
and grain and those kinds of, those are tangibles, right?
Right.
Those kinds of things, money, physical resources, that's what comes under the purview of this house. And this particular house can also represent your desires and values, or the country's desires and values. Okay. So in Capricorn, there's a really strong pull towards tradition.
Okay.
Towards hierarchy.
Okay.
Towards structure. And, if you're looking at the polarity of Cancer being the sign of the parent or the mom, and then Capricorn being the sign of the father, that this particular house could be said to be about, the structure of the possessions and the patriarchal, like a patriarchal lineage.
Okay. Interesting.
The second house operates in the field of material needs.
Okay.
And it really points to what we value the most.
So when a Pluto returns, and if Pluto is about transformation, about metamorphosis, possibility, change, 246 years, I'm guessing then that means that a Pluto return is an opportunity to investigate what's working and what isn't.
Yeah, exactly.
And possibly make changes, hopefully for the better.
Well, you've got to keep in mind that whole metaphor of the compost pile, right?
Yeah.
The metaphor of the butterfly and the chrysalis, going from goo to this incredibly beautiful restructured form. And actually that's going from one element that's kind of crawling around, walking around on land, moving into a different kind of element flying in the air.
Yeah. Ooh, that's really fascinating too. Like a change of modality almost.
Yeah, exactly. So right now, where Pluto is that if you round up, it's at 28 degrees of Capricorn. So it's in this second house. So we're looking at what must come out, what must be exposed in terms of the use of our resources, in terms of the country's use of resources, power issues, also conflicts. So Pluto started out in July 4th of 1776 at 5:10 local mean time in Philadelphia, PA, 246 years ago. It started out on a journey. And it influenced every part of the zodiac as it went around the chart. Okay, then the chart is just a map.
Right.
I mean, Pluto moves through the solar system.
Right.
And we're looking at this as if, we're on Earth. And so it's moving through these various parts of the chart of the United States. And it comes back around to its placement, its natal placement. And it says, did you hold true to what you started?
Wow.
So it's really asking us to look at where we've been and where we started and where we are now compared to where we started.
Okay.
In terms of what Pluto represents, power issues, conflicts, it can mean in the second house, transformation, changes to the economic systems, changes to the power structures. It can bring up a lot of fear.
Yeah, sure. Well, change is hard.
And it can also provide a lot of growth as well.
Yeah, that feels like the optimistic, positive possibility side of this is that, yes, change can be tough. Change can be a struggle, but keeping in mind, like the caterpillar becomes the butterfly.
Yeah. And the thing that's really the most challenging thing about Pluto, and it's hard to really talk about it because, you know, we don't specifically have, I mean, Sarah was asking me, well, are there other countries that have had
civilizations,
Pluto returns? I mean, you could go back and look at Britain.
Okay, yeah, right.
You could also look at the Roman Empire.
Sure.
In terms of every 250 years, somewhere in there was this change, something, you know, either they went way out and expanded, or we don't know the nature of that. We can't say exactly we don't have a date and time, in other words, for the start of the Roman Empire, but you can kind of look at, in a general sense, look at when different leaders came in and what they instituted. So there are these waves of
these cycles,
250 years cycles that brought up change, you know, brought something up and then brought something down. You know, it's like a cycle of growth and then regeneration.
Yeah.
So there is the potential, you know, because Pluto has such a deep working process.
Yes.
You know, like to break down the soil, to break down the compost. There's so much biological activity to break down all of that. If you think about it, you know, you throw the cucumber peel into the compost pile.
Yeah.
And immediately the process of oxidation, and then little bugs, and then cellular structure breaking down through action of heat and water and cold and heat and enzymes, you know, on the subparticle level, things are working, right? Things are going on.
Yes.
And you have to kind of use that metaphor right now with the country's Pluto return, that on a lower level, like on a level that we can't see.
Yeah.
And this is Pluto, it's biological, it's subconscious. So it's breaking down what no longer serves so that it can be used for something that regenerates.
Yeah. Yes. So now we're going to be starting another 246-year cycle of hopefully integrating some change, looking at structures that aren't working. Is there an aspect, feel like you mentioned, like where Venus was, that could help the country as we move forward, or what Venus values? There was something we were talking about in terms of where Venus is in the chart, because we like to look at Venus.
Yeah, well, there's a triple conjunction. There's a stellium of Venus at 3 degrees Cancer, Jupiter right next to Venus at 5 degrees Cancer, and then both of them, that was my little dog, both of them make a wide conjunction to the Sun at 13 degrees Cancer. So there is this sense of, I mean, it could be an inflated sense of self, you know, with Jupiter right there, but we can also have a radical self, you know, a look at our own self-awareness. And Pluto, you know, having made its own return here, it goes back further because Pluto was opposite the Sun, you know, so this is a process. So when Pluto was at 13 degrees Capricorn, it was still in the second house. When Pluto entered Capricorn, it was 2008. And we all know, you know, what a struggle 2008 was.
Right. Housing crisis.
Yeah. And how it brought up
politics.
It brought up a lot of corruption. Right.
Yeah.
So as Pluto moved through Capricorn, it got to 13 degrees Capricorn and it made an opposition. Pluto opposed the natal sun of the Sibley chart at 13 degrees Cancer.
Right.
So we're in this ongoing process is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And Pluto will be leaving Capricorn and moving into Aquarius, and it will still be in the second house of the US chart. And it will be moving through that particular house of this particular US chart until Pluto reaches 24 degrees Aquarius.
Okay.
And we could do a whole other show on what Pluto and Aquarius means.
So how do you want to wrap up with this Pluto return, July 4th, 2022, this 246-year cycle? What are your final thoughts about the chart, the Sibley chart for the United States? What should we leave our listeners with?
Well, I had a great Rumi quote for us all.
Oh, wonderful. Rumi is, of course, the great Persian poet.
Yeah. It's called Chickpea to Cook. A chickpea leaps almost over the rim of the pot where it's being boiled and says, "Why are you doing this to me?" The cook knocks him down with the ladle. "Don't you try to jump out. You think I'm torturing you? I'm giving you flavor so you can mix with spices and rice and be the lovely vitality of a human being. Remember when you drank rain in the garden? That was for this. Grace first, sexual pleasure, then a boiling new life begins and the friend has something good to eat. Eventually the chickpea will say to the cook, 'Boil me some more, hit me with a skimming spoon. I can't do this by myself. I'm like an elephant that dreams of gardens back in Hindustan and doesn't pay attention to his driver. You're my cook, my driver, my way into existence. I love your cooking.'
Wow.
The cook says, 'I was once like you, fresh from the ground. Then I boiled in time and boiled in the body, 2 fierce boilings. My animal soul grew powerful. I controlled it with practices and boiled some more and boiled once beyond that and became your teacher.'" So that's Pluto is our teacher right now.
There you go. That sounds like a great plan. Well, thank you for all of that. If you have questions, you can email us at connect@sisterstargazers.com. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Sara.
I'm Jude. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to Sister Stargazers. Let us know what worked for you this week. Find us on Facebook and post a comment at Sister Stargazers.